All right. Thank you, Brittany. We're ready to go.
Ready to go.
All right. Welcome, folks, to the October 7th meeting of the Government Operations Committee. Our committee members are here. They're gathering their items to sit at the table here.
I see Mike Lane's on.
Well, he's not on the committee.
I thought he was.
He
Mike
was.
Sigler.
He was last year. Yeah, Mike Sigler will be joining us late today. Are there any changes to the agenda? Just to let everyone know, there was an email from Brittany, an informational only item, a budget transfer. So that's in your email and also in a paper copy. I think we have one comment from the public. Ted Crane is here, and Ted, I would invite you to talk now, and when we get to the discussion about the conservation easement, if there's more that you need to say, you can jump in then. But
Sure.
Welcome. You have 3 minutes now.
Okay. Thanks for your interest in this proposed legislation, which is intended to provide incentives for the preservation of open space and the existing natural environment. And your proposed resolution has a lot going for it. You've got the right idea, and you're promising at least 2 improvements to the bill that was previously passed by the state legislature at the request of the town of Danby. First, that the benefits should be available to all of Tompkins County, not just Danby. And there is the explicit suggestion that conservation easements with qualified organizations should also be eligible for the exemptions. They probably would have been anyway, because the town would simply accept them, but it's a good idea. Now, the proposal originated in Danby, where development has been chewing up the natural environment for decades. Anecdotally, it has been said that Danby's primary agricultural product is building lots. The proposal also has one unfortunate conclusion, that the tax exemption should range from about 10% to 50%, rather than the 50% to 90% as specified in current law, existing law, and the request from town of Danby. And I'm kind of puzzled why those restrictive amounts were chosen. After all, this proposed tax exemption and all tax exemptions like it are revenue neutral to the taxing jurisdiction. It won't cost the county anything. Also, as sort of alluded to in Jay Franklin's memo, introducing special treatment for Tompkins County as compared to other municipalities affected by this legislation might impede passage of the legislation. Now, I said already it's revenue neutral to the county. The tax benefits are created by shifting the tax burden to other properties. And you know, there are an awful lot of other properties that won't get the benefit, but the burden that'll be shifted will be very small to each one of them. It's unlikely that speaking Danby, I'm sure you can generalize it to the county, it's unlikely that more than a dozen or 2 properties in Danby out of more than 1,500, actually 2,000 if you count the state, will take advantage of this. Perhaps $2 or $3 million of assessed value, which works to about $10,000 of tax, county tax, compared to a total levy that is huge. In Danby, we figured it might add $6 or $7 to the property tax. With the county's much larger tax base, for example, in Collegetown, I read that a single property group was valued at $16 million. With that tax base, it might just add pennies to the average tax bill. Do I have time to give a quick example?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay,
Quick.
just quickly, I'll talk about my neighbor. It's a little less familiar than talking about my own property, but they have about 65 acres. It's vertical real estate, and it includes a very small gorge. And if they were participants in this program with a 10% exemption, they might get, what did I figure, about $40 worth of benefit in tax a year. The cost of creating the conservation easement is so much more than that, that it's not cost effective for them to do it based on the county tax alone, and probably not based on even school tax and town tax as well. And that's a fairly large property. The problem we have is that the owners of very large properties are literally paying tens of thousands of dollars in tax per year. Not all of that is because of the land value, and only the land value is what's being exempted. But it causes them to think twice before saying, am I hanging on to this, or can I take a quick $20,000 by selling 1 acre? And that's what we're trying to prevent people from doing. And later, I'm sure I hope you'll have questions later. Thanks.
Yeah, great, thank you. Great, I don't think we had any other comments from the public. So let's go ahead and take our minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes, September 2nd and September 21st. Can someone move the minutes, please? Dan, seconded by Leslie. And all in favor? I think we can just raise our hands because nobody's on Zoom. This is really strange that we're all here. That passes unanimously. Thank you. I feel like usually I'm seeing you on Zoom. Okay, we're going to go on to assessment, and Jay Franklin is here. And our first topic is an appointment to the Board of Assessment Review, ID 10410. Hi, Jay.
Hello, everyone. How are y'all?
Good. How are you doing?
You're doing just great.
All right, we got here, there's a note here about the reappointment. Is there anything more you need to say about that?
No, it's just every 5 years we have to reappoint a member to the Board of Assessment Review. We could have 3 2-5 members. We have 3 out of simplicity. But to be able to have Mr. DeRoos willing to serve again just shows the quality of people that we have willing to serve the public here in Tompkins County. I can't say enough about Jan and being able to keep him on this bar and what he can do for the property owners of Tompkins County.
Great, that's a good recommendation. I guess we have to vote on this? Is that true? Okay. Rich moves it, Leslie seconds it. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Thank you, that's unanimous.
I do have a comment. Thank you to Mr. DeRoos.
Yes, definitely. All right, let's move on to talk about the resolution urging New York State to adopt a conservation easement exemption for Tompkins County, ID 10411. And could somebody move that and then we'll talk about it? Leslie moves, seconded by Dan. Thank you. All right, so we have talked about this a little bit in the past, and you do have a memo in your packet. But Jay, why don't you talk to us a little bit more?
So after coming before you, I think 2 months ago, I went back, may have been a month ago. I went back, I talked to Scott Doyle, and Scott's here on the meeting, graciously willing to join us to discuss this. And after taking a look at that scale of what the exemption offers, I felt it was more appropriate to reduce those percentages based upon what other exemptions offer within the county. And then what your use of this property is limited by these different time easements, so to speak. So, you know, right now, the largest exemption you have in the county is to be fully exempt from property taxes. The next largest would be a forestry exemption, on where the DEC really doesn't allow you to do anything to that property. And that's an 80% exemption. With the conservation easements, you're still able to enjoy your property, still be able to do the majority things on it. You just can't build on it, is really one of the big big restrictions that you have. So based upon that, I felt the 50% reduction in taxable value would be more appropriate. The time conservation easements, there's really not a lot of benefit to the public, especially where most of these conservation easements are going. There's not a lot of development pressure on the rural areas here in the county as a whole. Yeah, you may see a lot or two, but we're not going to see a subdivision anywhere outside of the town of Ithaca. That's anything significant. So but that's also the problem with conservation easements. Do you protect land in the more rural areas because it's cheaper, or do you protect the more pressured land, but that's more expensive? So where are you going to get your bang for your buck? But with this is just a recommendation to you. Obviously, you're free to go ahead and change this. But if we're urging New York State to do something, I think it's appropriate to urge what's most appropriate for Tompkins County and not what was already done by other municipalities.
Sure, that makes sense. Hang on one second, Rich. I just want to clarify, and maybe I'm just misunderstanding, but the resolution, the numbers in the resolved are different than the numbers in the memo. And I'm not sure why I
Right.
don't.
The only difference is that the memo is what I brought to you at the July meeting. With those figures that reflects what it was. After discussions, that's when I said, I think it's more appropriate for Tompkins County to reduce those values down to reflect.
Great, that makes sense. Thank you.
Cost of the conservation. Yep.
Rich?
I just couldn't hear when our guest was speaking. Was it $12 a year in his example?
Ted, can you respond?
Let me take a quick look at my notes.
This was, you were talking about if the easement was in place, I think for 15 to 29 years, taxable benefit would be.
Yes. I'm doing this kind of from my head, but his assessed value on the land there is about $90,000. The most recent county tax levy was somewhat over 4 per mil. And if you took 10% of the 96,000, call it 90,000, call it 9,000, 4 per mil, I think that came out to something like $40 a year, yes.
Okay.
The $12 figure that I gave was based on Danby, where if we had 10 or 20 properties, I can't really see it, at least in the short run, being much more than that. They might be worth $2 or $3 million compared to about a $300 million total assessment for Danby. Proportionally, it works down, and that's where the figure I gave for how much it would cost an average citizen, average property owner in Danby. And if it were Danby only, that would mean pennies at the county level to the average property owner. But I think you could extrapolate from Danby that if there were people, if there were places in the rest of the county, the proportion of properties would be similarly small as it is in Danby, and the impact to the county because of the much more valuable properties in the rest. Danby is not valuable properties. You can argue with me, but compared to a commercial block downtown, it's not a valuable property. Again, the impact is very small.
Great, we need to get some other committee members. Dan and then Leslie, thanks.
Thank you. I'm not sure you're going to be able to find someone who's more in favor of conservation easements than me. However, it pains me to say that there's part of this that's really does not work for me at all, which is the partial exemptions for partial lifespans for a certain set number of years. I just do not see the value of that in real conservation terms. So here's an example. The first years range is 15 to 29 years, and you get a 10% or some amount, depends on what percentage we decide on. So 15 to 29 years, like that is a reasonable expectation of the rest of my lifespan. That's about how long I could expect to live, 15 to
Oh, I hope
29
you
more
live
years.
longer than that.
29 would be good. So it's like, okay. So I am going to take a conservation easement on my property for 29 years. I'm going to pay less taxes for the rest of my life. I die, someone buys my land, and then they do whatever they want with that land. There's no long-term protection to that land. For me, the value of conservation easements is the perpetuity word. And that's really the only kind of conservation easements I think are worthwhile. Because otherwise, even though, as Ted has pointed out, the dollar amounts probably are on the small side, but regardless, what happens then is that the rest of the taxpayers of Danby and the county are paying for me to have my forest around my house for the next 29 years. Thank you, taxpayers, but it's not really a conservation goal. So if there's other people that think that my idea makes sense, then I won't do it yet, but I'd be willing to make an amendment to eliminate that middle section where it has the variable amount of years. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. I don't know, Jay, or maybe Scott, I don't know if they're, like, where did this idea come from of this sort of percentage for a couple of years?
The way the prior laws were written had those percentages in it. So I wanted to stay as consistent as possible to the prior laws. But I do agree with Dan that the only conservation easements that are worth, I think, incentivizing are those ones that are kept in perpetuity.
Thanks.
And point of information.
Yeah.
So Dan, you're saying you would just have the perpetual 50% reduction
Yes,
and get rid of the others.
Ted, I'm going to stay with the committee members for now. Leslie?
So building off Dan's point, I've been wondering more about process and operations logistics. So if we make this possible for towns to adopt some level of language for conservation easement, what's the process and where's the onus on folks ensuring that these conservation easements for these periods of time are being adhered to? Is it something that we've built in? Have we done the legwork to figure out who has to go out to a property and see at year 16 if it's still being managed as such? And that's a challenge. So I'm just wondering what we're thinking of for that.
I mean, I could answer, but I'm going to defer to Scott because I know Scott likes going out and checking out some of our conservation easements. So.
You got your work
All
plate
right,
filled.
Scott, it's all you.
All right, yeah, those are great points. I mean, I do share Dan's passion for easements for sure, and I've seen how they work. I do share the same concerns too. As you know, not all, we want to incentivize this, but not all easements are created equal. So to speak to both your points, these done well take a tremendous amount of work. Certainly see, and I want to encourage people to do this, but towns need to know what they're getting into if they're doing this, and they need to do that well. And you need to really have a fine-tuned monitoring plan for how it's going to work and in perpetuity. And as we've found, that not only takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of money too. You know, you think about that for the long term. So our projects usually budget for how that's going to work. And I'm with you too. One of the things that I feel like in terms of things not created equal, they take a lot of time to develop too. In the term easement, but a lot of those are seen in a lot of our ag community. You see a lot of that through the NRCS and other programs that incentivize for protection for a period of time or buffers to stream. It's always bewildered me because, yeah, okay, for a 10-year time period, that's going to work for you, but then that fades away. That doesn't seem like a good investment of public dollars to me. So, yeah, certainly I think you need to, at minimum, change the incentive to spark that percentage for the long-term piece. But be wary of that too. If you're going to encourage that, something that may fade away and lose that value after a period of time. So I think those couple of points they take a lot of effort, as you mentioned, and a lot of cost. And so I think we need to incentivize this, but make sure it's kind of a little bit difficult to not have kind of standards for what this would be. And I'm not sure how you would structure that, but it's a hard thing to think about how that will work in the end. And the other point too, I think what Jay was alluding to is it's not clear what easements impacts are on value. They may impact value on some properties, sometimes not on others. So you want to incentivize the protection, but that may or may not correlate to that value as well. So I think a good thing to do, but yeah, as you brought up, there are some very tricky components to think about for assurances that you're going to get what you want out of it.
Great, thank you for that explanation. Other thoughts? Dan?
So yes, good one, good ones, good questions, good issues. I'll just mention briefly what's going on in Danby concerning the enforcement's not the right word.
Enforcement is a real word. Yeah.
Enforcement, okay, let's call it that. So
And monitoring, yeah.
monitoring,
Okay.
thank you. In Danby, there's a organization that was set up called the Conservation Advisory Council by the town board. And they are charged with a number of things. It's a state, there's a state law that enabled Danby to do that. And so there's a bunch of activities that it can engage in. And one of them is the monitoring of conservation easements. And they have taken it up as perhaps their major activity. So it's a group of volunteers, but it is embedded in the town structure. So, will that go on for perpetuity? Of course, nobody can know, but at least that's the kind of setup that happened to hopefully make that happen. So to Leslie's question, yes, the other towns would need to put some kind of process into place in order to make sure it happens. That's all, thanks.
Okay, Rich?
Well, I had one idea that we could key all the exemptions to Dan's actual lifetime. So he wouldn't worry about it.
And Dan's in charge of monitoring.
Right.
And Dan's in charge of enforcement.
Yeah, the exemptions all go away when Dan goes away. And then he would rest easy because he wouldn't know what happens afterwards.
Sounds good.
But barring that, I would entertain what Dan was talking about, which is just go to the 50% for perpetual. Then you can do it in the deeds. It runs with the land.
Yeah.
There's clarity, and it would be far easier for the local building departments to keep track of.
Okay, so Dan, do you want to make a motion?
Sure. I would make a motion to amend the resolution. So starting on line 20, where it says resolve further that for Tompkins County, the exemption, adding the word for, F-O-R, and then crossing out everything that comes after that for a while. So eliminating scale for the conservation easement shall be, and then all those numbers, all the way through to the word value, that's still going to be eliminated. And then it continues, perpetual is what it already says, and then I would add in conservation shall be, and then it continues 50% reduction in taxable value. So I can repeat that for anyone that needs it.
Yes, please.
Okay, so now I'm just going to read it as it would read with my amendment. Resolved further that for Tompkins County, the exemption for perpetual conservation shall be a 50% reduction in taxable value.
Okay.
Leslie, you want to second it?
I do.
Leslie will second it, even though Rich already said he would entertain it.
I'm entertaining.
Okay, all right, you are entertaining. Any other questions on the amendment or comments? Seeing none, let's go ahead and vote on that amendment. All in favor? That's unanimous. Okay, so now that is the main text. Anyone, do we have any other conversation on this topic in general? Dan.
Scott raised the question of what are the standards, and I'm wondering, that's a really good question. I'm wondering if maybe Ted has something to say about that, or anybody else has something to say about that.
Ted, do you want to jump in?
Sure. I jotted down a few notes as we were going. Yes, standards. The law that was proposed explicitly says that the town, through its conservation board, which in Danby would be the Conservation Advisory Council, has to determine that the contract, which is what an easement is, the contract has to be specifically beneficial to the town, because the law recognizes that the town is doing something which is of benefit to an individual, so it has to be of benefit to the town. And the Conservation Advisory Council, basically through the town through the CAC, has the right, does not have to accept a conservation easement if they don't think it's good for the town. And there is the difference, you might say, between this kind of exemption and, say, an ag exemption. I've got a 50% ag exemption on a good deal of my property because someone mows it. I mean, I love it. It's a good idea. But who's getting anything out? Is the town, are the residents getting anything out of it? When you give a tax abatement to a commercial enterprise downtown, where's the benefit? In the case of these easements, the benefit is to the explicit policy stated in Danby's comprehensive plan that open space is valuable, preserving rural character is valuable, and the benefits are presumably, at least in my humble opinion, much more to the neighbors of the person getting the exemption. I can speak to my own neighbors. Every time I see them, they pass by they drive through one of my fields and they say, when I see that field, I know I'm home, because it's so nice to them. So the CAC is there to do the checking. This is a public benefit. Compared to ag exemptions, 50% is nothing. You can do better than that if you're in active agriculture with good soils, et cetera, et cetera. 15 years, like Dan, I'm going to be gone probably before 15-year period expires.
You guys are morbid. I wouldn't be here till 100.
You know what I'm talking about. And I'm a guy who wants to preserve the land for the sake of preserving the land, for what good it does for the public. What we're talking about here is approaching people who view the land as their patrimony, their retirement income, and we're trying to convince them. And that was the reason that that the committee that worked on this and the town itself, as it was passed up the ladder, had no problem with the short terms. They said, look, 15 years is a long time. If we can stave off development, and with all due respect to the assessment department, they have a macro view in Danby. We're very sensitive to those couple of dozen new developments every year. If we can stave off development for 15 years, we're a happy bunch of campers. So did that answer your question and many more besides?
Yes.
Not sure, but.
Well, Ted, are you saying that embedded in this law is that each easement would be needed to be approved with the details spelled out by that town's government apparatus?
That is, well, first of all, that's the nature of a conservation easement. But in order to qualify for the exemption, you have to have a conservation easement. It has to be approved by the town under the town's conditions. It definitely has to be something that is viewed as a benefit to the town. Yes, absolutely.
Great. Let me get Jay Franklin in here.
No, that is not part of this urging New York State. Most towns don't have a conservation board, and I wouldn't want to force that upon them. So this would allow this exemption for conservation easements that have been granted to a qualifying organization. And I've worked with Scott to come up with better terminology than qualifying. So this could be a Finger Lakes Land Trust type of operation. And I wouldn't want to get into looking at, is this conservation easement a benefit, but this one isn't? I think you're really getting down deep into the weeds, and other circumstances other than the conservation easement could affect that decision on whether to say that that's a benefit or not a benefit. I think it's one for all. Conservation easement should be deserving of this exemption, or conservation easement should just be eligible for the income tax credit that they get currently.
Great, thanks, Jay. Leslie?
Jay, can I ask a qualifying question, which is somewhere in the original law? Is there a definition of a qualifying organization?
Yes.
Great.
It would be an accredited land trust, I believe.
Okay.
In the original law, I can read you the text of what was proposed by Danby, which was very closely modeled on what is existing law in 4 other towns in the state. It says, such conservation board shall investigate the area to determine if the proposal would be of benefit to the people of the town and may negotiate the terms and conditions of the offer. If the Conservation Board determines that it is in the public interest to accept such proposal, it shall recommend to the town board, who gets another voice in this, and town board, that it hold a public hearing for the purpose of determining whether or not the town should accept the proposal. And then the town board has to vote on it. So if a town doesn't have a mechanism set up to evaluate conservation easements right now, well, Danby does. If you want to extend it to the town, that's your resolution, and you probably should tack something in there that their mechanism has to be established. Quite reasonable.
All right, thanks, Ted. Other questions or comments on what we have in front of us?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm not really clear then. If we were to pass this resolution, what are we saying about the standards, or what are we saying about the mechanism for which properties could be included?
I mean, this would be for any conservation easement that would be granted to a qualifying organization. So it couldn't be granted to J. Franklin Land Trust, Inc., unless I was qualified at that. So it would be a legitimate land preservation organization, which would then accept that. We would then assume that they would accept conservation easements that are beneficial in value, as opposed to willy-nilly granting them. I don't want to get into having someone decide what conservation easement is a benefit and what isn't. That just brings in too many outside influences and as to whether a town could grant it. And our exemption statute could be completely different than an exemption statute that a town would grant as well. We're constantly juggling different exemptions here, different qualifications. You know, our biggest one is the enhanced star and low-income senior. Different scales, different definitions of income even for different municipalities. So we can handle that, but I think we should do what we want to do. The towns do what they want to do. The schools do what they want to do in terms of this.
Can I just ask a quick clarifying question? So does that accredited organizations, does that include the towns themselves? Do they sort of automatically fall into that category? If the town of Groton wants to provide an easement? No.
Scott, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, so the accredited land trust, part of why that's important. So the land trust alliance it's a pretty standard term for these entities. And part of the reason why this is so important for these accredited land trusts, and sometimes I've seen partnerships with communities and land trusts, for instance, just to do monitoring. Part of why this is so important, that accreditation process makes sure that they have a history of being able to appropriately monitor, track, and enforce issues that happen at the time. And, you know, and sometimes most times when we do easement projects, there's stewardship funds that are dedicated to not only do the monitoring, but provide the enforcement dollars that you need for different issues. I mean, I've been doing this work with the town or with the county and different towns for about 15 years. And a lot of pretty complicated issues have come up over that time. And so that's just something I just wanted to note, that's important for any community that's getting into this, to make sure that they're, you know, thinking through what that takes on. But then the other point too is just the importance of this. The monitoring is a really critical piece to, you know, not only make sure what's going on, make sure it's up to the terms of the easement, but to establish that long-term relationship with that landowner, to make sure that if something comes up, they can talk to the easement holder about an issue before it even develops potentially. But to answer your question, no, municipalities aren't necessarily automatically accredited for as much, but I think you could make the case that your entity is ready, you know, it can do that, but I think they definitely need that infrastructure or relationships with potentially a land trust to help with aspects.
Great, thank you. Okay, are we ready to vote on this? All right, let's go ahead and vote. All in favor with the amendment? That is unanimous. Great. Thank you all for your work on this. And thanks, Ted, for further information. And great. I think that's all, unless you have other updates from assessment, Jay.
My only other update is you may see me coming back asking to reinstitute the local boards of assessment review for the 2022 assessment review process. I think with the number of changes, the amount of dollar in those changes, it may be wise to reinstitute those this year. So I think expect me to come back in November. I think this would be the third year of our 3-year hiatus. But I think this is an extenuating circumstance that the property owners could use those review boards.
Great. Okay. Rich has a question.
Jay, you probably have reported on this elsewhere, but I missed it. Could you just update us real quickly on your staffing? Are you getting what you need? Are you hiring?
Yep. Yeah, we just had 2 new individuals start on Monday. So David Ogden and Ezra Nakorantab started on Monday as assistant real property appraisers. I'm still down one kind of new one, but I think we saturated the assistant real property appraiser market here in the area. So I'm going to wait a little bit, probably till the first of the year, and try to recruit some more. But we had 2 declinations after interviews, before offers, and 4 people who signed up who declined to come in for interviews. So we're good right now, but we'll be better in 2 months.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Jay, if you revive the assessment review board, does that include donuts at the training again?
Of course, Dan.
Just
That's one thing we like to do here in the assessment office is eat. So yes, donuts and bagels will be provided.
Oh,
I just wanted to get that on the record.
I'm there.
Yeah.
Except we'll probably do it via Zoom. So we may have to have a shortstop deliver to you. So.
All right. Great. Thank you. We will look forward to seeing you again next month.
All right, thank you all.
Think about your lifespan.
Yeah.
Shorten it
Eat
by a few
wisely.
minutes.
Cholesterol. That's a lot of cholesterol. All right. Moving on to administration, and our communications director, Dominic Recchio, has a couple things to talk to us about today. Hi, Dom.
Hey, Amanda. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I am going to share my screen if that's okay with you. And there's a couple of things that I want to walk through. I sent a document to legislators in advance. Let's see here. You should be able to see this now. Can you see that shared?
Yes.
Great. So one of the things when I came on board here as communications director, there hasn't been a ton of sort of county brand archives or access for different departments to clearly use different parts of the county seal or other things. And working on COVID and reimagining, we did a lot of things sort of from scratch during those. And I felt like it would be good to go through things that already exist in the county and sort of create some just draft guidelines. These aren't designed to be any requirements for the county or departments beyond what's in the charter. I'll show you in a second. But this is really meant to be a preferred from my office or perspective brand guidelines and style guide for different departments to use or for me to use as well as I do work. I think what this is also meant to do is project consistency. One of the things that I heard a lot about back when I was applying for this job in the interview process was that it feels like a lot of different organizations here at the county and as our departments, rather than sort of projecting one county organization with many departments. So with that sort of inspiration, I've been drafting these over time since I started and thought that now was a good time to share the draft I'm at, continue to get feedback from legislators, and then also some feedback from department heads and other staff members throughout the county. This has been shown. I got some feedback from the Public Information Advisory Board as well. So I'll walk you through a few of the things here. You can see that I sort of outline why the county seal is the main county brand and mark. It's in the county charter. I had reached out to the county historian and others to get some information on the county seal. There is one file here that's a very high resolution version of the seal that someone, I think from the planning department, was able to get to me early on. But, you know, I think we're lucky to have that particular version because there's a lot of different versions that live throughout different places. So trying to get one, you know, nice high resolution version everyone can use was a part of the fact finding I did for this. So the county seal with the eagle and the arrows and olives, or an olive branch on the other hand, are is in the county seal. The number of stars is dictated by the county seal, et cetera. So I kind of outlined that in this. I was actually just over at the History Center talking about this with Ben Sandberg, and he was reminding me that the United States chose its eagle and arrows from, in particular, the Haudenosaunee people and some of the marks that they had as well. So that's not explicitly stated in county documents, but since this is also designed on the U.S. Sort of seal or other things, that's just an interesting fact. Happened to learn today as well. You can see I show some examples of how to use the seal and some layout samples of how far away it should be from text. Really kind of a user guide for using the county seal. Have some samples of secondary logos that are used throughout the county as well. You know, every time someone sort of uploads and downloads one of these from the internet, it becomes a little less high quality of an image. So I plan to create downloadable high resolution files for all of these once I am a little bit closer to being done, so that people can use consistent logos and know when to use certain things. This is what we developed for the county values that was approved, I think, earlier this year as well. And this is the website logo. Again, don't have a good high resolution version of this, and I would recommend we change this in the future as well, but that conversation doesn't have to necessarily happen today. Oftentimes people look for a geographical outline of the county, so I have a high resolution one of those we'll make available. Some guidelines on things to avoid using. I know this can be a little, people have a lot of feelings about the colors and different things, which I respect and understand. I don't want to make this totally prescriptive to everyone, but you know, certain other representations of the county seal, we just don't have high resolution copies, or they don't reproduce or print well. So that's a concern of mine as I've gone through this. The faded information or logo behind information, like the legislature's letterhead, it looks very nice printed most of the time, but if someone has a little visual impairment or something like that, it can be a little bit harder to read. So sort of instructing folks to avoid that, or some other examples as well. I've done some preferred fonts that are sort of modeled after the county seal or other sort of documents that have been used in the past. And this Cooper medium font, you'll see I use in various places. I've used it in this document as well. It looks similar to some of what's in the county seal as well. So it's chosen for that reason. Some alternative fonts and colors. All of these colors were sort of picked from the painted seal in legislature chambers. So this is the red color of the olives. This is the green color of the leaves, you know, in case folks wanted to use alternate colors that go well together. And these are from the website. And I think this is probably some of the more consequential part of this particular idea is just a default departmental logo. A lot of departments have letterhead that looks different, or they'll use just their name, or maybe they'll just use the county seal. And so for departments that don't have an official logo that they've done through community engagement or specifically for their department, you can see some examples down here. My plan is to create just a very simple default logo for everyone, that if they want a high resolution one that just says who they are and associates it with the county seal, they can do so. So that's certainly my preferred approach. I think this is something I'm looking for feedback on too, if this suffices for people and works and is descriptive enough of what the office or department is in relation to the county. Some suggested color schemes as well. I have a couple of use cases in the future I can show for what I'm thinking here. And then I've lined out some shared principles for if departments do want to create their own logos. A couple of things I think that are important. One is that it should say Tompkins County. Luckily, all of our departmental logos that have been created on their own say Tompkins County, which is really nice. And that they should be legible and involve stakeholder engagement as well. I think it's just an important note. Obviously, departments kind of have their own processes with these things, but I can tell you right now, I'm working with the health department on their integration and merger and identity, and just trying to think of stakeholder engagement and things through that are really important. So having it written down somewhere that it should involve stakeholder engagement, I think is important. And the last bit here is I plan to also use this to create a default letterhead for different departments. Some departments, it may look different. In particular, actually, the legislature has the resolutions have their own letterhead as well. And I wouldn't want to confuse between the two. So I was talking to Kathy about that. But for some departments that may have less, graphic tools or different things, I was just going to create a default one that folks can use if they choose to as well. You can see I put the inclusion through diversity as a tagline that departments should use if they don't have their own, or will be in the footer of different ones as well. And then I lay out some suggestions for photography. If folks use it, I find it difficult. Sometimes people will use photography in presentations or documents without explaining where it is in our community. And so many people look at these things, they should know, who or where something is. So trying to give some guidelines on that as well. And I've been working on a publicly available photo database for media or for others to sort of download to reflect the county a little bit better in what we do. So I can keep my screen shared or stop share if you want and answer any questions. But that's the overview of the brand guidelines I've been working on, and I'm looking forward to feedback and questions and input.
Great, thank you, Tom. You have done a lot of work on this, and I love this kind of stuff, so that's great. Leslie has a question.
I just want to say thank you. I think it would be really helpful to have some, it's not uniformity, it's more looking for coherence and making sure, it's interesting to me, you had a couple of the other logos down at the bottom of a page a couple pages ago. For example, recycling and what happens over at the dump site, the recycling site, the place where people go to drop their branches, whatever it is. A lot of folks do not know that that is affiliated with Tompkins County, right? They think about the function. And so how we can create that connection so that people are aware of the fact that it is Tompkins County. And then there are other logos, and I'm wondering, are you going to have some kind of priority on the page where folks who already have established other logos can use it as a footer, as opposed to a header where you'll have your Tompkins County brand or something like this? Will there be some order of operations where people can continue to use those recognizable symbols?
I'm hoping so. I am hoping to integrate the seal in footers or in more places with those different departments. Some do it really consistently and put them next to each other and it's really clear. And some are, just really focused on clients and customers rather than the wider connection. So I see my role as helping to bridge some of that as well and make that clear, because a taxpayer or a resident asking a question just may have no idea of the connection between the things. And I feel that connection you're describing is important. So.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Rich.
Yeah, just for clarity, have we had this brand of the seal since 1817?
Well, let's look back. Let me look back at the charter section. I don't believe so. I think this was a newer edit to the charter.
1980s kind of thing seemed.
Yeah. And so I think I don't have the exact date that charter change was.
83.
83?
No,
Oh, okay. I mean, it certainly could be.
I don't know.
Yeah, the 20 stars and the 13 stars is historically interesting, but sort of goofy. It doesn't have anything to do with us,
How many municipalities are there?
well,
That's
right,
what
I was counting
that's
this,
what I always thought it was the municipalities.
Yeah,
and that would be
meaningful.
meaningful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm big on history, but maybe it's time to think about it.
Oh, man, that's too big of a question. We're changing the
As soon as we
seal.
finish the
Think
code of
about-
conduct, I think there's,
Oh my gosh.
and advisory boards, maybe we go there next. I also had a question about departmental variation and having dealt with this issue of branding at my prior employment, I'm wondering, is there an editorial context there? Would you like to try to see reduction in departmental variation?
Yes.
Personally, yes, I would. I think it can be a costly endeavor, and I think it's great when it first happens and people are really excited and engaged with it. But over time, I think people lose access to files. People lose the reasoning why they've done certain variations, and then it just kind of loses its luster a little bit over time. Whereas something like a county seal or something it just lasts a lot. It's designed to last a lot longer as well. So those are a few of the reasons I think it's difficult. My editorial. I would add though that the difference is when they have customers or someone that maybe associates it with something like the green, recycling is a perfect example of people know what that is when they see it. They're not confused. It works exceptionally well. Emergency response. I don't know if any of them have that patch on their clothing or anything, but if it's used for an official responder outfit, I understand, like that. But yes, I think reducing them over time would be valuable.
All right, Mike Lane?
Well, good morning.
Good
I guess it's
morning.
afternoon now, sorry. Don, what a lot of work you've done here. I think the description of the county seal is very old. It's nothing that was done recently. I can't tell you exactly when. It may be back with the original, right after the original charter to the county was given it wasn't a charter, but it was the authorizing legislation in 1817. I think probably the seal was designed right after that. And I think it's a perfectly good logo, that seal. The modified seal that you're showing is nice. We've used it a lot, and nothing wrong with it. But it's I always thought it was a little lopsided with the holding the olive leaves or whatever there. You're asking for feedback.
Mhm.
I also think your letterheads are pretty nondescript and aren't exciting at all by using that same thing on all of them. I guess I don't know if I'm not, I guess maybe I'm not such a fan of the uniformity, but that's just my opinion. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Great, thanks, Mike. It sounds like, Don, you had talked to Kathy, but she did mention to me yesterday or the day before, when she looked at it, that, one of your examples of what not to do was what they do here. And, she had some concerns that would be hard to change, or, they use that a lot at the legislature clerks. So, I mean, you said this is not, obviously this isn't going to be, coming down from above. Every department has to suddenly change. So I guess what would your recommendation be for departments who may need to start making some of these changes? Will you help sort of walk people through as they,
Yeah, that is my plan. My plan is, after getting more feedback from folks, to make all of the sort of images and things downloadable and do all of that for people. And then I'll be offering to departments, however they envision their documentation or otherwise using this or otherwise. I'll work with them directly. And yeah, I think many of them will end up keeping things similar to what they have. But there are various who, I've already had a few discussions with department heads who've been kind of inspired by the idea and wanted to sit with me to come up with something a little more creative, but also not too out of, something that connects. So I think over the next few months, you might see other departments come up with some things that are that sort of are even more creative than we might have seen if we just had without this guideline. So yes, my plan is to work with all of them individually.
Great. And yeah, and I guess, and you kind of mentioned, but Kathy also said too, is that, you know, the resolutions have a certain look and the clerk's letterhead has a certain look, and we don't necessarily want them all to look the same. So people can differentiate, but you're aware of that. And Leslie has a question.
So now that we've opened up for design input, I didn't know we were going to go there, but it's an interesting point while you're, you know, standardizing. So one idea would be, are you going to set a target date whereby we're moving toward these standards in 6 months' time, end of year, beginning of whatever it is, some sort of target timeline so that different departments can look at how many documents utilize this letterhead, or what are the considerations for any kind of mailings or any kind of investments in pens or anything like this, because those end up having this kind of ancillary cost in thinking about that, as well as updating websites. But if we're looking at the seal, which is a beautiful piece here in Chambers, but not so pretty in black and white sketch, would we consider changing that?
I think that is outside of my purview. And I will say I came in confused by the seal and not liking it as much, but really kind of in getting, you know, becoming a fan of it over time and knowing that it was a part of the charter and things have, you know, so that I think is really a legislature level charter type decision. And I'd be happy to provide input and guide along the way with any of that. But the stars thing is a perfect example of something that could be added to it even more deeply if that were the route to go.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
All right, Rich was over there examining the seal up close. Any comments, Rich?
No, it is a nice work. It's really well done. And yeah, I don't know why Dominic wants to get rid of it.
He doesn't. That's not what he's saying.
I anticipated that at least at some point during this process. I will, but I'm just prepared to sort of defend along what I think is reasonable and accessible for the public to know, and to get people to I mean, we do a lot of amazing things here, and just getting people to see that it's a part of the county government wider, I think is my intention and goal.
Great. Well, thank you for your work on it. And if there's other things that we can do to support you, let us know.
Certainly will. And would you like me to move over quickly to the email newsletter update?
Yes, that would be great.
Great. I'm going to share my screen again. And you will see, I'll start with the county website just to show you sort of how people are signing up for our email newsletter. But I'll preface it with the legislature approved a contingent request to implement it's called Gov Delivery. It's by the same people who offer some technology for the streaming of legislature meetings and the Minute Track software that you all use. And Gov Delivery is an email newsletter platform used by governments, everyone from the Social Services Administration at the federal level to the governor's office in New York. And now Tompkins County has started using it. And so you can see here on the homepage, we've added a link that people can subscribe to it. And I haven't announced this extremely widely to the community yet, but I'm preparing a press release to encourage more community members to sign up for these. But I wanted to show you today that it's available, where to find it, what it is, and then some examples of what we have so far. So people from the community can use their email address and take a look at all of the different updates under different categories that they can receive as members of the public. So I worked with departments. I offered to all of our departments at the county the ability to use this software. And I've worked with, I've gone through almost all of the ones who suggested they were interested in using it to help put together templates and talk through this and train them on how to use the software. And you can see here, there's over 30 different newsletters that people can subscribe to. And my goal, and what I've suggested is sort of the soft requirement for departments, is to do something at least quarterly with these lists that they have access to, if not more. I'd personally love to see more, but quarterly is the baseline for departments to use. So everything from our COVID-19 updates list to law firm and bank and title changes from the clerk's office, et cetera. So what I did was I took our COVID updates list that we used MailChimp software during the pandemic with. I exported all of those contacts and then offered them to sign up for the rest of these. So some of these started with, I mean, thousands of people have already subscribed to several of these lists. An example is the legislature highlights went from 100 people in an Outlook list I was using to, I think, about 700 people are now subscribed and get highlights from every legislature meeting.
We're popular.
Yeah, which is great. And that's an example that I think has really paid off and will over time, because I can't always guarantee that every press release we put out will be covered by the local news outlets. So this is sort of a way to add to that, that coverage as well. So you can sign up here. You can see a little more information about the different newsletters we have. And I'll just show you some examples of newsletters that have gone out so far. So this is one of our COVID updates emails. This went out to about 30,000 people. That's how many are on our COVID updates list. This one includes the upcoming booster clinics, which are all actually full now, which is exciting, in part because we were able to send it directly to people. And generally press release, but other sort of information from that is included. This is one of the examples of the highlights from recent legislature meeting. This was an expanded budget committee meeting. And you can see there's updates. I put some photos in here from different folks who presented budgets as well. People can click and read previous ones or share public comment with the legislature. And again, this went out to about 700 people. This is one that's probably a little bit more indicative of what different departments will do. It's just a regular newsletter. The Department of Emergency Response will send these quarterly. Emergency Preparedness, there's about a little over 1,000 people on this list. And it just breaks down information on Fire Prevention Week, dispatchers completing mental health training, fall weather safety. They'll sort of do this quarterly, so they'll have, each season will have its own information, a link to the Swift 911 alerts as well. The district attorney, I'm always sort of shocked at the lack of coverage of some things that happen, including local cases and courts. But Matt has graciously, agreed to put out more information on different things that he and his office are working on, updates on cases. This has somewhere around 500 people who have subscribed so far, a Q&A section, and then contact. And then I started one for local advisory boards as well, so that anytime we have openings, we can sort of send those out. And several hundred people have already indicated they'd be interested in joining advisory boards, which is great. And so my plan next, after this sample one I sent out, is to actually have a big listing of here's all the different things you can do. And hopefully these get forwarded to listservs and all of that. And the last thing I'll say is you can see these headers here all are designed to follow the branding guidelines. So it's kind of a real world test of the branding guidelines we looked at a little bit ago. So I can stop sharing my screen there and answer any questions you have.
Yeah, great. It looks great. I see you, Leslie. I just got to ask first. So do the departments, are they actually going in and setting these things up themselves? And like they know how to do that?
I think it's done.
Yeah. So what I've done is I'm sitting with each one of them and making templates with them or training them on it. And we also have someone who's from the software company who can answer technical questions for them. But I'm working with each one to take their old lists and upload to this. Once I upload the old list, I email them all saying, we're now using this new service. You can opt in or out, and you can opt into these other lists as well. And then, they're able to do this all on their own. So the one you saw from emergency response and the DA's office, they built those out themselves. looked at it for them to make sure there were no errors or anything for their first one. But other than that, they're given access and sent off on their way, good to go.
Awesome. That's great. Leslie?
So I received this, I guess we all got it a couple of weeks ago in my email. So I just clicked around a little bit, signed up for 8 to 10 of the different newsletters. I'm not on any newsletters, and there are many people in our community who wouldn't have been or haven't followed a thread or a conversation for years. We have new folks all the time. These are amazing. I've been checking out, after participating in the expanded budget meetings, I've been reading your
What
summaries.
happened?
It's very coherent. It's very focused.
Yeah.
I like the branding. Instead of getting random emails that people will get all day long and maybe not prioritize, this really helps people focus if they're interested in that conversation or that particular organization. I recommend we post the links to this on some of our most traveled web pages, whichever those are, to let folks know, and of course, blast them out. Highly recommend my colleagues sign up for threads that, of course, they're involved in or interested in, but this is awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Leslie.
Okay. Other comments or questions? All right. Well, thank you for your ongoing good work.
Thank you. I
it.
appreciate that. Thanks for the support.
Yep. All right. And I think that's all from administration for the moment. So let's move on to our resolution amending the rules of the legislature once again. So this is resolution amending rules 5 and 17 of the legislature, Legislator Code of Conduct, ID 10417. Can somebody move that? Rich moves. Leslie seconds. And you all know we have been through this several times. This is the final for this committee. Go over this and we'll decide if we want to move this on to the legislature. Dan?
Thank you. So first of all, is this month's version different than last time's versions? Has it changed since then?
Yes,
Okay.
and unfortunately, the changes that I made, I highlighted, but it wasn't printed in color. So
What is it, the underlines and crossouts? Does that indicate what's
that's
changed?
all the old
That's the old,
changes.
okay. Okay,
There was only a handful that had come up at the previous meeting. Okay, so on page 22, there was some changes under the non-routine request requiring special effort. You can see a couple of very vague highlights. This was the discussion about who should be
oh yeah,
consulted. So we changed it to say folks should direct their requests to the appropriate special or standing, excuse me, committee chair and the relevant department head. So that was added. And then a little bit farther below, the county administrator shall be kept apprised of the request. That was added. And then on the last page, 23, I added in that legislators shall conduct annual performance reviews of employees who report directly to the legislature. So those are the things that I had marked down that we had discussed that folks wanted to change. So go ahead.
so I brought up a few things last time. And I'm not going to make a big deal of it, but I'm still just looking for some clarification, I guess. Under Rule 5, Order and Decorum, so we're on packet page 19. First couple of paragraphs. There's some discussion there. There's some prescription there about, you know, how debate gets stopped and who gets to talk and how the vote happens and all that. And last time I said, does this have to do with order and decorum, or is this about any decisions And it was pointed out that, it's under the paragraph of order and decorum, so it must be referring to that. And the reason I'm bringing it up, because it seemed to me from reading through Robert's rules, what I could figure out is that there are different rules having to do with appeals depending upon what it is that's being appealed. And if this is all about order and decorum, if that is the correct answer, which I think it is, then I'm wondering if we could just put the words order and decorum in there a few times in the text. So let me just give you an example of what I mean. The second big paragraph where it starts, if an appeal is requested, it would be something like saying, if an appeal on a matter of order and decorum is requested.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to, I'm not trying to invent a rule, but it seemed to me from what I read that there are, it's not just all appeals would follow this paragraph. So that's what I'm trying to distinguish. I
Right.
don't want to change the meaning though, so.
And I think that at some future date, some future reading of this could be taken out of context or. So on that note, in the first paragraph, in the middle, the chair may be called upon to make decisions about the conduct of legislators subject to appeal of the legislature as a whole. I mean, is that clear enough, or because it's related to
We could take out conduct and put in order and decorum.
make decisions about order and decorum of legislators?
Yeah.
Or,
To make decisions on conduct with regard to order and decorum.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah,
like
with regard to,
after legislators.
with regard to order.
Not about their social life.
Okay. Are you following us, Brittany?
So we're taking out conduct.
The chair may be called upon to make decisions
no, you can leave conduct in with.
about conduct of legislators with regard to order and decorum.
Yeah.
Subject to appeal of the legislature as a whole. So that's one. And then the beginning of the next paragraph, if an appeal is requested on a matter of order and decorum, a decision from, wait.
Chair shall have the right to explain.
It's like there's an extra word in there.
About the decision of the chair.
About the decision of the chair?
Yeah.
Okay,
Instead
so
of from.
instead of from, about a decision of the chair. The chair shall have the right to explain the reason.
For the decision.
Okay. What else you got, Dan?
That's it.
Yeah. That's good.
Thanks.
Okay, and you got that, Brittany?
Yes.
Too? Okay. Other edits? Leslie?
Not an edit, just a question. So we've made some significant changes or additions here around role of chair and committee chair. And I just wonder, has our legislature chair seen this at all yet?
I don't know. She's had
Okay.
the opportunity to,
Okay.
just like everyone.
Sure.
I haven't sent it to her specifically.
Okay. Just before it ends up going to the full body to discuss. Just wondering. Okay, thanks.
Sure.
I think they're all good additions, but yes.
You were on the subcommittee.
That's why.
All right, well, we will have an opportunity to talk about it again when it goes to the full legislature and answer other questions, or make any other changes. So I think we moved it. All in favor
With the amendments?
with those, yeah, those changes?
Yep.
That would be unanimous. Okay,
Doing great.
Right, now we are going to move on to Legislator Dan Klein, who has been wanting to talk about downtown parking with us. And take it away, Dan.
Okay, thanks. So, let's see. I've been really pleased that we have this extra parking lot in the last 2 years, maybe. I think it's made a big difference. It's definitely made a big difference for me. I know I always have a parking spot. But I've also been kind of watching, observing things and thinking about it. And so I just had some ideas that I just wanted to roll by you, some observations and some ideas. So let me just start through them. Right now, I'm just gonna call it the Sears Street parking lot. It just makes it easier words for me. We have, we were told at the beginning that we could park there, but that we have to have our tags on, and that if we don't have our tag hanging from the window, we will get a ticket, a notice. And that happened to me once. I forgot to put my tag up. And there was like a harshly worded notice that came, and it told me that whenever it happens again, that they've recorded my license plate, and if I'm ever there again without my tag, I will get a ticket. And that this was happening, that parking lot was being patrolled by our Human Resources Department, I believe twice a day. I think they're going out at like 10 and 3 or something like that. And then during the pandemic, I assumed that the patrolling ended. So that's just one thing. I don't know if the status of the patrolling, and it's a question that we should talk about, whether we want that kind of patrolling, whether they want it, that department wants to be doing that. They probably don't. And what we do about violations. And so I'll just keep going from there. I park in that lot almost every day. I come to town almost every day. And I count the cars in the lot every day. And it's been between 15 and 25 quite consistently over the last month or so, really since September. Over the summer, it was a lot less. Once September started, it filled back up again a little bit. So, and there's a lot more room in that lot, a lot more cars. So one suggestion I had was to resend out, maybe not right away, maybe until we work through some of these issues, but resend out an email to all the county employees on the downtown campus, reminding them of this lot and that they're invited to park there, because these lots are still difficult. The lots around the building are still quite crowded and hard to get a good spot in. So if even just a few people were reminded of that, maybe didn't even know about it. Maybe they started working here in the last 2 years and don't even know about it. I think if even like 5 employees switched over that lot, it would make a big impact on our closer lots. I don't know if originally when we implemented this parking, we got that lot and sent out notice to our employees, whether the court employees were invited to use that lot. And if not, I would propose inviting them too, for the same reason that spaces are really tight. And if even just a few of them went over to that lot, it would make a big difference for everybody. It would help everybody. I had an idea about advisory board. Now, we don't have a lot of advisory boards meeting in person, and especially not here anymore. We used to meet at the old jail a lot, and parking was always a big deal for them. They were not allowed to park in these lots. And so I would propose, at least consider, opening up the Sears Street lot for anyone that's coming to the county to participate in an advisory committee meeting. And then extending it further, I would think we should consider, if somebody's coming to do business at our other departments that are here, the Board of Elections, Assessment, the County Clerk's Office, or even IT, anyone, for somebody that has business here in one of these buildings, that they could be invited to use that lot while they're here conducting their business. It could be a very friendly thing for the community to be offering that. I would put up a friendly sign at the parking lot, something along the lines of, "This lot is owned by Tompkins County. You are welcome to park here while engaged in business with Tompkins County government." So I want to come across as a friendly neighbor, not as a, "You will be towed if you do not stay here." Right now, the lot is not paved, and there are some really big places where water collects. And that takes out a lot of actual square footage of what's available. The water stays there for quite a long time and gradually recedes. So I would propose having highway or facilities take a quick look at it and see if they have some quick ideas. Maybe just a quick grading, like a simple, grade all kind of thing, go through it. Or maybe bringing in a truckload or 2 or 3 of gravel to fill in those spots, whatever the people that know about that stuff think. It would be far short of paving, but it would be, maybe we could get some of that space back without too much trouble and too much cost. There are no painted parking lines in the lot, so I think we should consider doing that. Maybe doing a temporary, cheap homemade version of it to see if it works. And I think if we establish something like that, even as those lines faded, people would sort of know where to park, and maybe we don't need to do an expensive professional job, at least not for some amount of time down the line. And then an observation. I spent a lot of time at a house on Lynn Street, and it's right next to the Christian Science Church. And they have a parking lot there that is really comparable to our lot. It's roughly the same size. It's a little smaller, I think. And it's literally just a few blocks away. And so it's in the same neighborhood, and it has the same function, which is if somebody knows about that lot and wanted a quick free parking spot to go do their stuff downtown, they can park there and get away with it, which is I think I want to say what we're a little worried about our lot. We don't want just everybody in the city using it just as a place to park. So in this lot that I observe a lot, a few years ago, the church stopped strict enforcement. They stopped towing. They took down their mean sign. There's a sign there that says it's for their parking, but people park there all the time. And it's usually just a very small number of cars, 2, 3, 4 cars. And I see that some people leave their car there for an hour while they go do something and they come back. Some people leave it there for a few more hours, but the church changed their policy. They don't tow them, and that lot has not filled up. It is not a problem. I also see it being used for occasional delivery trucks that need a place to do a quick stop off. I've seen utility trucks use it quite a bit, NYSEG, and probably others that aren't marked. And it's a really valuable service to the neighborhood, in my opinion. I would be interested in seeing our lot fill in that kind of role. And that's where I'll stop. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Rich?
Yeah, Dan, you said a lot of different things there. I wanted to just provide you with some information from the direction of downtown facilities and the neighbors. I recently got an email I passed on to Arel where there was a complaint about the large puddles and that they helped breed mosquitoes in that neighborhood. And I think Arel was addressing some of that. I don't know if they were going to put any gravel in, but they were going to try to do some cleanup around the edges. I'd also like to make you aware that we did have discussion at downtown facilities about the future development of that larger parcel, and recognizing that we weren't prepared to make a decision about the whole parcel. We did talk about, are we ready to make a decision about 3 building lots along Sear Street? And the consensus seemed to be, yeah, we don't want to sit on our hands for 2 years just thinking about it. We can go forward with that. Downtown Facilities is meeting next week, and they may well be considering a resolution at that time, just so you're aware. I agree with a lot of what you said. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Rich. Leslie?
To Rich's point, you covered a whole lot of material and thinking around parking. I started taking notes on any number of directions to go in. So here are just some high-level thoughts. Understanding what our county government parking needs are, as well as the inventory of potential parking spaces, would be what I would suggest we do first if we think we have a parking problem. There is a downtown parking challenge. There's no question. The city has been actively attempting to identify what the parking plan is for both long and short-term parking, daily parking, and tying that in with TDM programs and, you know, our supporting transit. So how do we as a county government fit into that when we are in the downtown neighborhoods is something we'd want to be thinking about. I don't know what our inventory is and how much our employees can or do use transit is a question. And we'd need all that data, how much we're going to grow as we continue to fund new positions. And are those positions housed downtown where it's immediate to a parking facility is another question. Enforcement is always an issue. We already talked about that earlier today with a different subject. I don't know if HR folks are expected to go out and give tickets. That's an interesting thing. But long-term parking maintenance, management, and investment, it's not cheap to do anything in a parking lot, sadly. If there's water, it could be drainage issues. But so understanding the long-term plan for the parking and how much of it, to Rich's last point there, is going to stay in parking would help define, I think, our course for investment in improving the lot, whether it's from gravel up to, you know, asphalt paving to striping to signage. They all cost money, and how much is going to stay in parking might be worth investing in. That said, if downtown facilities, now I'll jump into the future, is planning to move forward with anything at that site, even limited lots development on for residential on Sears, I can almost guarantee that half that lot will be gone because it'll be needed for staging for construction because there's no other space to go. So we should be thinking about what the temporary use is right now for parking. If we're concerned about trip fall hazards, that's a real issue on our own for liability on our own parking lot if there are holes there. Accessibility is an issue that we're not even talking about. It's not terribly accessible out there, but could be, or portions could be. So thinking about that as far as safety, I think that we would need to, I would suggest that we would want to understand better our need and our supply, and then think about this lot in the context of that, as well as its current temporary status and its long-term plan for figuring out investment.
Okay, thank you. Mike Lane has stand up and then.
Thanks, Amanda. Sorry, I just lost connection and I tried one more time and it came back on. So I don't know why, but here I am again. But I heard most of what Dan said, and I certainly agree with him. This parking lot needs to be needs gravel at the very least to solve the problem of the puddling over there, and it needs to be better monitored. And this is something we're going to need for a long, long time. And for us to be racing toward selling it is the wrong way to be looking at this. I realize that some folks have wanted to do that from day one, but we don't want to do that. We want to be careful and to preserve the long-term best interest of the county, which is having that property available. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Lisa, your thoughts on parking?
Sure. Well, a few thoughts and just some things for the legislature to be aware of. So parking is not a guarantee or a term or condition of employment, but once you start offering it, it then becomes a term and condition of employment in a unionized environment. So for those downtown complex employees who have had the benefit of parking, it is essentially part and parcel of that. But there are several other county buildings that do not offer parking, including mental health, Office of Employment and Training, that are downtown that could benefit from parking. And we have proceeded with an MOU with the white collar union to open up the parking lot to those employees who requested it while the Green Street parking garage is under construction. You know, it's a few blocks away, but I believe some have taken us up on it and have been utilizing that parking lot during the time that it's available and that they have the need. So just to say, we have been opening it up, but there's a way in which to proceed to in a, within the unionized environment to just to make sure that it doesn't become a term and condition of employment. Also, in terms of the court employees, the spaces that are available currently to court employees are assigned and marked off in the current parking lot, and I believe those spaces have been negotiated with OCA. So I just want to make you aware that we would need to, those items would probably need to be negotiated on both of those terms. And then lastly, I believe that to Rich's point, I believe that Arel from facilities was going to be speaking with his staff with a plan for the upkeep to fill in the holes that were identified as for puddling and those other areas in the parking lot.
Great, thanks Lisa for all that. Are there any signs there right now that say that this is owned by Tompkins County and who can park there? Does anyone know?
I think it disappeared when the testing facility went up, but I could be wrong, but I think that's what happened.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that Arel is looking at the, the surface aspect of it, and that downtown facilities is going to be talking about, at least partially what we're going to do with it. So some of that long-term stuff is going to take a while. It's not going to be anything right now. And I feel like there were some parking surveys and,
Yes.
assessments done back when we were considering purchasing that. So a lot of that is, there.
Mm-hmm.
And we know there's a need. There's definitely a need. Did you want to respond?
No, that's pretty much what I was going to say, that there is a census that was done, inventory that was done as part of the downtown facilities work that shouldn't be too hard to find. And the other thing I guess I just want to say is that all my ideas were temporary. There was we should not put a lot of money into this right now, but these things are pretty straightforward and easy.
Is there a reason, I guess, Lisa, that we should not offer that parking area to court employees or advisory board folks?
Well, like I said, I think that it's been the spaces that we currently offer them are, I don't know, I would have to look into it. I believe that it's negotiated under a contract with the court employees. It's just hard to pull it back unless we stipulate in writing that this is temporary while we have the space.
Mm-hmm.
So, so we can look further into that.
Okay. Okay. Annie, what did you have your hand up, Rich?
I did.
Okay, Rich, and then Annie, and then Mike.
Yeah, just for clarity, when we had this discussion at downtown facilities, we were not talking about selling the whole parcel. And there was determination that if you did take 3 building lots, there would still be ample room to do a parking plan, depending on what happens with the dental building. But there is other space, and the idea was that that would go into the continued planning. And I'd also say, that not to dissuade us from talking about it here, but trying to make some determinations about parking is part of what downtown facilities is trying to do.
We did check with Dave McKenna before we started this conversation. He said, no problem if you have it here.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, Anne?
Thanks. I appreciate, the topic that has been brought up sounds like, from my point of view, to improve things and to offer more access. I would suggest putting it on the back burner for now, as we don't know what's going to happen with that property. We have to allow for other departments who don't usually use that area because of the Green Street construction that could be going on for quite a while. To do to me, consistency is a big thing. especially because we have unions, but even if we didn't have unions and negotiations and contracts with the court and all that, even if we didn't have that, consistency is a big deal. I know several employees spoke to me that it's been frustrating when we change the parking. They just need to know, and we change, oh, you can use this area. Now you can use this area. Now you can't have this. And the legislator's changing where we were parking. So I think consistency is a big deal. Since we don't know for sure what's who else needs to use that for right now, what other departments, we don't know what's going to be happening with that property. I would say, just minimal, keep it safe, and maybe we're looking at addressing a problem that maybe isn't really there. We don't know. So I just think especially now, I think we have bigger fish to fry. I would just hold off on doing anything for now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ann. Mike?
I just wanted to comment on the court employees, what was made, and Lisa's got it exactly right. This did come up previously, this issue, and administration, the previous administrator was cautious against going and renegotiating that contract with the state employees at this point.
All right, thank you. Parking is always a interesting thing to talk about. People have strong feelings about it. So it sounds like many of the things that Dan is suggesting, our folks are saying no. That's the sense I'm getting, other than the resurfacing of the lot. In terms of, reminding staff that they can park there, talking to the court employees. We didn't really talk about making it available to members of the public, but there might be some risk in that.
There could be in its current condition.
Right.
We might want to understand the risk. You're trying to make it safer. I get what you're proposing.
I would also say opening it up to members of the public then leads to a greater need for enforcement, because if the public starts to use it and crowds out employees, it means more staff time devoted to parking enforcement when that's not really anyone's job description. And that's kind of where things landed in HR when we had a scarcity of parking, when we had people, when we were just limited to these downtown lots that people in HR were contacting for towing or et cetera. So.
All right.
Yeah, just to be clear, I don't want patrolling. I don't think we actually need it. We have a lot of capacity in that parking lot. And yes, if it became to the point where it wasn't working, where people were abusing it, then we would need to change plans. But again, my experience with this other lot that's just 3 blocks away is that has not happened. And so I don't anticipate, I wouldn't expect it to happen here. If it did, we would deal with it. But I would like to err on the side of using this valuable resource we have for the good of as many people as we can, rather than saying we're worried that something bad might happen. Let's not even allow them in. That's how I would like to, the side I would like to err on.
All right, well, I thank you everybody for the thoughts and the comments. I tend to agree that we have this thing that we could be using more efficiently. I'm not really sure where to go next. It sounds like maybe the committee.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So Lisa, who ends up owning this? Is this falling in Arel's portfolio at the moment as far as a parking asset from the management of this space? Who ends up bearing the onus of any challenge that occurs out on the location?
So it breaks down between facilities, if it's a structural issue, maintenance, lighting, that sort of thing. And a very obscure resolution from the 1990s that stating that the Commissioner of Personnel was in charge of parking issues and parking complaints, which is why HR staff were the ones to go out and do the monitoring and so forth.
Interesting. Right.
All right, thanks for that information. What would you like to do next, Dan?
Nothing.
Okay.
Let everyone digest it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks for bringing that up, and thanks for the discussion and all the information. Moving on, if anybody quickly has a report they want to share, I would just reiterate what I said the other night, where I'm working on scheduling interviews with the applicants for the Redistricting Commission. Thank you, folks, for returning information to me, those who did. And I have narrowed it down to 12 applicants that I'm trying to negotiate the scheduling, and we set some dates aside. I know that Rich can't be there for some of them, and I think there's a few other, yeah, we'll do our best. Lisa, do you have any updates for us?
Only to say, you know, I see you guys all the time. You know what we're up to. We're doing a lot of budget in terms of county admin. Also working on the shared services plan. Amy Hendricks is leading that effort together with, you know, the TCOG and our municipal partners. And also, this is the first week of the mandatory employee vaccination testing program. Amy's also been the lead in heading that up, and we'll have more to report on that in the weeks to come. But that's been quite a logistical effort in the twice a week testing for employees. So we're working through those issues, and we'll have some progress to report to you, some outcomes in the weeks ahead.
Great, thank you. Questions for Lisa? All right, I see Amy is here. Do you have any updates or thoughts for us, Amy?
I do not, and I have too much light in this room to actually be seen, but no, I think Lisa handled it all. We're working through those logistics of the testing program, and, you know, still with COVID response and shared services and so much more.
Great, thank you for all you're doing. I don't see Jonathan, but he would probably have no report. Rick, anything you want to tell us about?
Nothing to report today.
All right. Thank you. Let's see, Dominic, we already talked to you quite a bit, but is there anything else you want to share?
Just that continuing to do a lot of work on reimagining public safety, community engagement, as well as COVID-19 communications are still in full force with the different PIOs from that. And then just thank you again for letting me present those other things to you this morning or this afternoon. That's all I have.
Great, thank you. Committee members, anything you want to bring up or share?
The only thing I want to share is I'll be interested to see how our vaccination and testing continues and surveillance program in light of new changing moves, particularly recently from Cornell for establishing a vaccine mandate with a deadline in December. So I don't know how much that will start to impact or reflect into this work here at county government.
Rich.
Off topic, but the term vaccine mandate, I really think we should avoid saying that if you read historically, say the smallpox epidemic, there were mandates enforced where they went in and took people out of houses, forcibly vaccinated them, imprisoned them in quarantine. We're not doing any of that. It's really, it's either vaccine choice and there's consequences to that, or vaccine requirements. I just think it's a much better term. I wasn't picking on you, but I hear this all the time, and it's just, you know, we don't have a driver's license mandate. You can go get a driver's license if you want to drive. You know, there's just consequences if you don't, you can't drive. And I don't know why we fell into that, and we keep using this.
So then it would be work requirements. If you want to work, is that what your
Yeah.
flip side of?
Yeah,
Okay.
you know, it's puzzling to me. We've adopted some language that really isn't accurate, and I think it's damaging to how we think about our vaccines. Anyway, sorry.
Parking mandates.
Parking mandate.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to park.
There we go. That's
Well, you people who live down here can just walk.
You can walk.
It'll be a long walk.
It's good exercise, isn't
Yeah.
All right, I think we're good.
it?
We can stay around and talk more about parking and mandates, but this meeting is adjourned. Thank
There we
you.
go. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks.